Happy New Year to everyone, and welcome back to Family Law Now Live. We appreciate you joining us for this presentation on supporting client and lawyer mental wellness through divorce and separation. We often see divorce inquiries spike in January, and a critical aspect to consider is the impact this journey has on the mental health of the individuals that are navigating separation and divorce, clients and lawyers included. And we also recognize that January can be a particularly challenging time for navigating mental health. That's why we are honored to have mental health professional Jonathan Paynter and Amrit Malhotra join Russell on the panel for this very important discussion to share their insights and expertise in this area. Before I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers, we would like to get started with a quick poll to get to know our audience a bit better as well. I'm also just going to go through and take a moment to share what our presenters will be covering in this presentation. So first off, we have recognizing the emotional toll of divorce on individuals, the impact on families and children, adverse childhood experiences, the emotional toll of separation and divorce proceedings on lawyers, relationship between mental well-being and legal outcomes, creating a supportive legal environment, providing emotional support to clients, lawyer self-care strategies, recognizing burnout and warning signs. And as Russ mentioned, we'll also be doing some Q&A throughout the presentation, as well as a dedicated Q&A segment at the end. If you weren't on the call yet, I did mention that we have added an additional 15 minutes to our presentations for 2024, just to allow for more time for the content of the presentation, but also to allow more for audience questions. So first, I want to thank Jonathan for being here on the panel. Jonathan Paynter is a registered social worker and psychotherapist who works in the family law system, completing parenting plan assessments, voice of the child reports, family mediation, and collaborative family law and private practice. He also provides psychotherapy such as cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy, and couples counseling for children and adults. Jonathan is also on the board of directors of the Ontario Association for Family Mediation, holding the executive position as treasurer of the board, and is on the board of Collaborative Practice Durham Region. We also want to thank Amrit Malhotra for joining us today. Amrit holds a Master of Social Work degree from the University of Toronto and practices as a registered social worker specializing in fertility and third-party reproduction, healthcare, trauma, grief, and loss. She also is an accredited family mediator with the Ontario Association for Family Mediation and is a collaborative practice family professional. Amrit is a board member with Collaborative Divorce Toronto and Collaborative Practice Hamilton Halton. She is also the co-chair of the Counseling Special Interest Group at the Canadian Fertility Andrology Society. In addition, she provides individual and couple counseling in her private practice and is the president of Invicta Counseling. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'd like to introduce our founder and senior partner, Russell Alexander. With 25 years of experience, he uses his knowledge and expertise to serve his clients in all aspects of family law and helps them cope with the difficulties of separation and divorce. He uses his experience to create unique solutions for each client to enable them and their families to move forward and support through the transition of divorce and separation. Russell has also written 4 books on separation and divorce and is a fully trained collaborative practice lawyer. He speaks at conferences on collaborative practice, marketing technology, and the law. And now I hand things over to our presenters, and Russ, I'll let you take it away from here.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Shannon. Perfect as always. So let's see what our audience is comprised of. We did have somebody put into the Q&A or chat that they're a mediator. Thank you for that. So family lawyer, but 60% lawyer from a different area of law, 13% mental health professional, 4%. Law clerk students, we've got 2 students with us today. Always great to have students joining us. Thank you for being here. Going through a separation or divorce, 6%, and other, 10%. So again, if you want to share the other, put it in the box and we'll know who you are. So let's do one more poll while we have our polls up. So we'll go right to our second poll question. So this one is, how would you rate the awareness of mental health and well-being and emotional support within legal practice or the legal community you are part of? And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We've got a great turnout, over 130 people registered, which is great for the second week in January when people are still digging out. And let's get into the mental wellness poll question and awareness. What does the audience think? High awareness, 22%, moderate awareness, 52%, low awareness, 24%, and other 2%. Well, that's probably consistent with what I'm experiencing. 10 years ago, it wasn't talked about in the legal profession. It was almost viewed that if you're a lawyer and you're suffering depression or mental health issues, you're somehow not capable to be an effective lawyer, which is a real stigma that still exists in some parts of our profession. But Jonathan, what do you think of these results? Is that sort of consistent with what you're seeing?
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see that there's still a tremendous amount of work to do. I think we've made a lot of progress. Like when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about anxiety, depression. I never even heard the words. My kids, they're teenagers now. They know all about it. They
Yeah.
know more than I did when I started university, and I only surpassed their current level of knowledge once I started taking courses on, how to treat depression, how to treat anxiety. So I think we're definitely making progress, but it's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So mental health is still highly stigmatized. The mental health system in Ontario and Canada is still highly underfunded when you compare it to cancer treatment, which we should be spending a lot of money on cancer treatment, but also mental health. So I think it often gets second bill compared to other ailments, and people don't really believe that they're real. They're not real health problems.
We're not really proactive, right? We hear about professionals who burn out, who hit a wall, drug, alcohol addictions. Some lawyers commit suicide, unfortunately. We all know some lawyers in our community who have done that. And it seems like we hear about it after the fact. There's nothing too proactive about it. And it's hard to detect, right? Is the person, the one lawyer I know who killed himself, I had a case with him a few weeks earlier. We're out playing baseball. Everything seemed fine, and then it was over. I didn't see any warning signs coming, but it's just
it's tough, stressful work that we do, and life is stressful even if you don't have a stressful job, but adding a stressful job onto that, dealing with people in crisis, and we're highly emotional, and we have a few high conflict things on your caseload, it really does take a toll.
Yeah, and these cases can take a toll out of you as well. Amrit, what do you think of the poll results? Any comments on, is this consistent with sort of what your experience has been?
Yeah, I echo what Jonathan is saying. Certainly, mental health is health, and we have to start to recognize, and I'm really glad that we're having the opportunity to talk today, because it gives us an opportunity to highlight the need to address some of these concerns. It's really unfortunate. People need to know where the help is and how they can access it. So I'm glad that we're going to be touching on some of those things today.
Yeah, and we'll give everybody an opportunity, our audience, to share this recording with your colleagues and whoever you want for free. We want to try to educate as many people as we can. But this leads us into our first topic, actually, recognizing the emotional toll of divorce on individuals. So maybe you can lead us off on this one, Amrit.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So when people are going through their separation and divorce, it's probably one of the most stressful times that they've ever experienced in their life. It's one of those moments where everything just stands still. Usually we have an equilibrium in our lives, and it's like figure it out like a bit of a straight line. But once something like this happens, everything's a little bit off center. And the way that we would normally cope, we aren't able to cope in those same ways. There's a scale called the Holmes Rate Life Stress Inventory, and divorce is very high on that scale. It's at 73, and it's only preceded by the death of a spouse at 100. And just below that is a separation from a spouse. And so it's really, really high up there. There are many concerns that people have. It affects their functioning, their day-to-day functioning, how they eat, their appetite, their sleep patterns, how they're able to relate to others. Some of the concerns that they may have would be around their children, their finances, just everything for that person stops at that moment when they're dealing with it. And it can be very overwhelming. And if there are underlying issues of anxiety or depression or any other mental health issue that they're dealing with, it can be exacerbated during that time. And it's so critically important that supports are available to assist.
Yeah. And I'm just reading some of our audience comments as they're coming in. The court does not appreciate, just moving on, just from I want to talk about the individuals for a moment, but court does not appreciate
Yes.
when a lawyer is having an issue or needs mental or emotional health and needs a break for a short period of time. That's so true, right? You're supposed to be bulletproof when you go to court, and you're an officer of the court, and you shouldn't be wasting court time. And very, I think the court can certainly be much more accommodating when an officer of the court makes that request. They shouldn't, they should just defer to that person's judgment and give them the break. And then another question came in: the stigma still exists. This is interesting. If you tell the LSO that you're dealing with a mental health issue, they will initiate an investigation for capacity. Now that's scary, right? So, we're going to talk about the resources available with the Law Society, but I just want to talk about the toll on individuals for a moment, because this is a really important point that you brought up, Amrit. Think about what we do, right? We're dealing with clients at their worst. They're losing their spouse. There could be infidelity. There could be domestic violence. Their identity is going to be lost, right? Most of them identify as a married couple. Their friend group is going to change. They may lose their home. They might lose their children. They might not see their children anymore, depending on what's going on. They could lose their liberty, right? And on your scale, I think going to jail is up there too. So if you're in contempt of court or don't pay your support, you may lose your liberty at your worst. So we're really dealing with people at the lowest parts of their lives, right? And we want to be mindful of that when we're trying to provide them with professional service. But let's see what our audience is thinking. Let's go to our next poll. And thank you, everybody, for participating. How familiar are you with the concept of adverse child experience, or ACEs, and their potential impact on individuals and families going through a divorce? So this is interesting. I'll be curious to find out how much the audience knows about this. But let's go to another question that came in just as we're waiting. And one person we don't have on with us, which we usually do, are financial professionals or neutrals. We talk a lot about collaborative practice, but maybe you can, Jonathan, you and I can talk about the role of the financial, just came in. What is the role of the financial advisor and experts in reducing stress and mental wellness challenges for clients during divorce and separation? What do you think? Do financial professionals play a role?
I think they have a huge role to play, right? Because a lot of what has to happen during a separation is financial. So shouldering some of that burden and helping, like when parents are going through a separation divorce, there's a lot of fear. How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to afford a house? How am I going to afford a new car? All those kinds of things. And the financial professional can work with the couple to answer those questions and relieve a lot of that anxiety and be better at predicting the future, at least financially, for them. So that can be a huge role that they can play to take stress off the clients. What do you think, Russ?
Yeah, I'm a fan of financial professionals. I know a lot of lawyers like to grind out the work. It's an economic engine to produce the financial statement. I'd rather delegate it, have somebody else do it, for a number of reasons. It's less stressful on my team. It's less stressful for clients if they're working together, sharing information with one professional. We're not bringing emotion for disclosure. No, you don't get into that fight over documents and delay. I think it's better for the lawyer-client relationship, because I don't have to go chase my client for the documents they haven't given me yet, or become a nag, right? It's coming from a neutral person who's there to assist them. And I don't want my relationship with the client to be defined about me waiting for the tax return and asking for it, because I know the court's going to be upset if it's not filed on time, and there could be a cost order, but the clients don't always appreciate that. So I think they're really helpful in reducing the temperature, relieving the stress, improving the lawyer-client relationship, and a number of other aspects as well. But let's see what our audience is thinking. ACEs. All right.
Okay, so not a lot of people are very familiar.
No, not at all. So probably the most, you're almost 80-90%, right? So we're going to talk about it. You're in the right spot. But I just want to note, Shannon, thank you for doing this. She put the home stress inventory index into the chat. So if you want to see and go through that index that Amrit talked about, it's there for you. So thank you for doing that, Shannon. So impact on families and children, ACEs, Jonathan, educate us. What are we talking about?
Okay, so yeah, so an ACE, remember that like separation divorce is an emotional journey at its core. It's very stressful for the adults involved, and that stress can be infectious for the kids as well. So if your parents are always stressed, you're going to be stressed. And what we've learned over the last like 20 or 30 years is not just that stress is really bad for kids, but we also now understand why. So from the kid's perspective, stress, if it's at toxic levels, will actually cause the release of harmful hormones in their body that changes the way they develop. That's why children are so much more vulnerable, or one of the reasons why they're so much more vulnerable than adults to stress, is it actually changes the way their whole body and mind develop. So for example, if they live in constant stress during a separation, and maybe that stress drags out for 2 or 3 years, that can make their nervous system far more sensitive to stress. So basically, it causes long-term anxiety, and they're much less resilient when stressful events come up in their lives. So these toxic stress events are called adverse childhood experiences among the researchers. And I would encourage anybody who doesn't know about this topic to go out and learn as much as you can. It's fascinating, and it's really important to our work. So examples of ACEs might include witnessing violence, if they're experiencing lots of conflict between their parents, being separated for long periods of time from a loved parent, especially when they're little and their attachment bond is still forming, having parent-child contact problems. So if there's conflict between a parent and child, or a child rejects the parent because of alienation, either before, during, or after the separation, that can be really harmful. And then another, example is if the standards of living before and after separation are quite different, right? If they're all of a sudden living in poverty, we know that's really bad for kids. The other thing to keep in mind with ACEs is they're cumulative. So 2 is twice as bad as 1, and 4 is twice as bad as 2, and so on and so forth. So if they witness 1 violence incident at home, it's half as bad as witnessing 2 violent incidents at home, roughly. And kids, we know from the research that kids who have 4 or more ACEs during their childhood, the outcomes for them don't look great as adults. So for example, they're 3,000% more likely to attempt suicide as a young adult or as a teen than kids who don't have any ACEs. They're much more likely to develop, anxiety, depression. They're also much more likely to develop serious illnesses like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, all these kinds of things. So the mental and the physical health, like Amrit already said, they're one and the same thing. You can't separate them out. If you have a negative impact on your brain or your mind, you're going to have a negative impact on your body. So the work that we do as collaborative family professionals or family mediators or therapists or family lawyers is so important, because we can reduce the co-parenting conflict, and we can literally save children's lives by doing that, and make the outcome for them much, much better. And remember that stress for adults is also really bad, right? It's just as bad as heavy smoking or unhealthy eating or not exercising. And it can literally lead to an early death for us if we're experiencing stress. That stress can be from if you're going through a separation divorce, but it could also be working with people who are, traumatized and going through a divorce themselves. As a professional, you can be vicariously traumatized by other people's trauma. So we always have to keep that in mind, that stress has an impact on all of us, a negative impact, and we need to manage that as best we can and make sure that all of our practices take into account things like the trauma-informed approach, mental health for both us and our clients. Stress can also have a cascading effect. So if someone's more stressed out, they're much more likely to drink heavily or smoke or eat poorly or not sleep, which can sort of exacerbate health outcomes. So we want to make sure that we are aware of this and we address it.
You know, you mentioned that, Jonathan. I know when you and I get together with other collaborative professionals, if we're having a glass of wine at a conference or something, oftentimes we go back to those cases that left us with some PTSD. Do you remember that case where that client did this? And it's still 5 years later, it's still outrageous. It kind of burns a hole in your mind, right? That we're dealing with this trauma with our clients as well. So we have an audience request for some papers or books that focus on ACEs. Maybe we can include that in some show notes at the end of today's proceeding, Jonathan, if you've got some resources for our audience. Really important subject, though. Thank you. So the emotional toll in divorce proceedings on lawyers. Like I kind of told, a collaborative story of, we see just insane things. We can't, like, spouses who loved each other now wanting each other to die and saying that to their face, right? I had a client who was terminal, and he proudly announced in a collaborative setting that his cancer went into remission. And his wife got upset, and we're taking a professionals break, and she leans over me, my client sitting beside me, and on her way out for her coffee break, he says, "Why don't you just hurry up and die?" Right? It's like, oh my God. Wow. After he just opened up and revealed, that story, you think, what runs some of these people? But anyway, impact, I'm probably an example of what the impact is, but let's talk about it on lawyers. Amrit, can you help us out with this next one?
Sure, thank you. Just to Jonathan's point, when he's talked about vicarious trauma, there is so much of it, right? Someone else's trauma becomes your trauma, and it stays with you. We all have 2 or 3 files or cases or people that we've worked with that those memories are kind of etched in there that we remember. The best example I can give you is an example of when a difficult story may be shared, and let's say a message or something comes up on your phone at that moment. That same message may be a trigger for you later. But it may have been a benign message, but it might remind you of what was happening in the room at that time when you were listening to this very difficult story, and now it's with you, right? And not only when that's right.
There's a legendary story of a senior collaborative lawyer in Durham where the spouses were going at it so bad, he literally got on the boardroom table on all fours to separate the two from yelling at each other. Like, that's insane, right? Like, this is a collaborative setting, and we're still dealing with spouses like that. But sorry, go ahead. I know I know there's Durham lawyers in the audience, and I know everybody's nodding their head. They know who it is, but it's just one of those stories that you wouldn't believe if you told it to anybody who wasn't in the profession, right?
Absolutely. But you know what? We're human first. We may, and our profession later. And so we still feel, no matter how much of a bubble that you have around you, so that the essential you isn't penetrated, it still kind of seeps through sometimes, especially when it's cumulative and you're hearing story after story after story, and there's a lot of emotion and it's very heavy. Have you ever walked into a room where someone's just had an argument and there's this tension in the air that you can just, you can cut it with a knife? It's just really, really heavy. Well, if you're dealing with this day in, day out, it has an effect. It has an impact on even your sense of enjoyment, being able to enjoy in those normal happy things right after you've just dealt with a very difficult situation in your office and coming home to your kid's birthday party. You may not have the tolerance. You may find yourself a little more agitated than usual. You may be really struggling with things. It can cause people to feel a little bit helpless. It can make people feel like they've got a lack of control. They can't control the outcome. They can't make it any better, and they're feeling really kind of lost, maybe even guilty if the outcome didn't go exactly as they planned. It can also be very triggering if anyone has gone through their own divorce or separation. It may bring up their own situations or other circumstances where they felt that they weren't in control. So it's really important that we acknowledge that these are real events that are happening in others' lives. And as a helping professional, we have to be aware that it has an impact, a lasting impact on people. So this, I think the toll is real, and we have to name it. We have to
Yeah.
say we're really struggling. That's why I love collaborative law so much, because you get the opportunity to work in teams and maybe lean on the other professionals to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this one, or, I couldn't sleep last night because it just kept going through my mind, and it was really upsetting me, and I wanted to meet again so we could have those debriefs or debriefs after we've had those meetings, because they're really tough.
Yeah, and think about the court setting, right? That amplifies the stress for lawyers for a number of reasons. We do a lot of
Sure.
litigation at my firm.
Mhm.
Motions court, hugely stressful experience for a lot of lawyers, especially junior lawyers. You're worried you didn't prepare, you're going to miss an argument, you're going to get embarrassed in front of your colleagues, your client's going to be upset with you if you lose. The list is endless, literally, of what can go wrong. Trial work, probably 90% of the lawyers don't want to do trial work. It's too stressful. It's motions court times 3 the amount of preparation you got to do. You put your practice on hold. You pretty much put your family on hold. Come home after a day of court, you got to prepare for the next day, or the judge may have asked you to prepare a schedule or a document for the court. So you're working 11, 12, 1, 2 a.m. and then going to court the next morning and doing it all over again. So I know a lot of lawyers just choose not to do trials. It was too much for them. And the analogy I would use, if you ever play sports or hockey, when you go to trial or you go to motions court, you're always, you get that nervous excitement right before you go in. So you're firing on all cylinders. And I always tell people, other colleagues, that whenever you go to court, have that little nervous butterfly in your stomach, you're in trouble, right? You've overlooked something, or the train's coming down the tracks that you're not seeing. So, but that's just the elevated stress that you experience on lawyers just going through this process. But very helpful. Thank you. Relationship between mental well-being and legal outcomes. Jonathan, is there a relationship? What should we know?
Yes, and I'm sure a lot of people who are lawyers are aware of the difficulties of managing a highly emotional client in court. Court's already a very stressful experience, and if a client can't keep their emotions in check, then it could turn out really badly for them in court in front of a judge if they lose their temper or something like that. So I find like supporting our mental health and clients' mental health, this is where collaborative practice really shines, because the attitude that we have towards our work makes a big difference on, the client's experience of our work as well, right? If we take the attitude that we have to win against the other lawyer and defeat the other party, we're going to engage in a very conflictual, very stressful, long, costly, time-consuming process for the clients. This not just causes stress for the parents and the family system, but it also causes stress for the professionals involved. And going back to what Amrit said, like vicarious trauma is really subtle kind of trauma. And you may not really draw a straight line between your experiences with clients and the trauma. It's not like, if you get in a car accident, well, you can point to the car accident as the source of your trauma. It's really clear, but this day in, day out stress, it's much harder to put your finger on. And the effects can be a little bit more subtle and slowly kind of seep in your life. But if we can take a more holistic approach to working with our clients and see that one of our roles is to manage, mitigate, and reduce conflict, and help clients get through the process more mentally healthy than if we go to litigation, then collaborative is the best process. You have a team of like dedicated professionals, one of whom is a mental health professional, who are working together to meet the needs of the clients. They're not just supporting their clients, but the team is also supporting itself. So helping everyone with their own mental health. And like you said before, Russ, some lawyers poo-poo this idea because they're going to make less money, right? They're going to make a lot more money if they take a case to trial. But also keep in mind, like that has an impact on your personal life, on your family life, and on your health. And if if you have extra time that you're not being used to go to trial or make motions, then you can take on more clients and make more money. And ultimately, I don't think you can put a price on standard of living, quality of life, mental health. So I think collaborative for a lot of those reasons is the best approach for both clients and lawyers, even in high conflict, stressful cases. Yeah.
I'm thinking about this topic. I really like having family professionals involved, whether it's litigation or in the collaborative process, for a number of reasons, especially if one of the clients is dealing with some trauma or is not participating or is too emotionally upset for whatever reason. They lost their kid, there's infidelity, there's a million reasons why they'd be upset. They're a victim of domestic violence, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you have a family professional involved, it helps safeguards the outcome, in the sense that,
yeah,
you're not, if a court 5-6 years down the road goes to set aside your separation agreement or court order and asks the council, or if there's a lawsuit, you can say, well, we did bring in a family professional, we were screening for it, we made sure the client had capacity. So it really does add to the strength of the court order, the agreement that you're getting in place. But you want to be mindful of capacity issues, whether they're doing it voluntarily, whether they're under duress. Oftentimes, sometimes in CP, oftentimes at court, you'll get clients who get buyer's remorse. The next day, they decide they don't like what they agreed to. Now, that the court could have ran late. They could have been pressured to come to an agreement by their own lawyer or the judge. But I find it's best if you give them an opportunity to consider it for a few days, whatever the resolution is, so you don't get into that issue. The only other tip I would have for audience members is LawPro has an independent legal advice checklist, which is quite helpful when you're thinking about the outcomes and your client's mental health and the relationship there, in terms of safeguarding your own practice and your own insurance, that you're taking all the necessary steps to make sure everything's okay and the client's ready to sign. But let's go to our next poll question, because we haven't heard from our audience in a little while. So in your opinion, what role do lawyers play in mitigating the emotional toll of divorce on families, especially children? So let's give everybody a few moments to answer that. I'm going to do some housekeeping. I want to thank our host, Shannon. She did put into the webinar chat a resource link for the ACES resources. So we had some audience members asking about that. Thank you, Shannon, for sending that into the chat. We'll include it in our show notes as well at the end of today's presentation. And we had a couple questions that showed up, but I think they may have been answered. Scheduling conflicts, yes, we can make a recording available later. And all right, thank you. So I think we're up to date for the housekeeping matters. Let's go to Amrit with a question, because I haven't picked on you yet today. How can lawyers incorporate mental wellness considerations into their clients' consultations during the divorce? And what are some practical strategies for clients to manage stress and emotional challenges while going through a divorce or separation? Great question. Thank you for sending it in. What do you think, Amrit?
Okay, so I think the first part, when you're dealing with your client's mental health, it's important to do like a very thorough intake to understand sort of what the history is, what kind of supports may be in place. It might be really essential to have a family professional assist with some of that, so they can tell their story, to have that open time to be able to say, you know, this is what it looked like for them when they were in this situation in their marriage, and this is what it feels like to go through a divorce, and these are some of the concerns. And to explore whether there are any addictions issues or mental health concerns or a history of intimate partner violence, like other things that may come up as you're dealing with a file that may be very important to know. That's one way to really support clients through the process, is hear their story, give them the space to be able to do that, safe space. And then if we find that we're dealing with a client that's dealing with intimate partner violence, to ensure that the process makes sense for them, so that for example, if meetings are taking place by Zoom, to use the breakout room so they can have that individual consultation with their lawyer as needed. So they're doing an in-person meeting, there's safety considerations in place so that they're arriving maybe much prior to and leaving earlier than the partner that may be abusive. Ensuring that there's debriefs with the clients and giving them an opportunity to tell you, how they experienced what happened. Because many clients, when they have a trauma history, they might freeze, right? Or they may go into fight mode, or they may just want to run away, or they might just acquiesce and give you exactly what's being asked for, even though they don't really comprehend or understand, but they're just doing it because they feel pressured or coerced. I want to go back to the question that was raised about the financial professional and the importance of how they can assist. And I think with the financial professional, it's really important as well because they can assess for knowledge base, right? One client may not have as much knowledge as the other when it comes to financial matters, or there could be coercion or financial control, and that would be an opportunity to kind of disseminate that information as well.
Yeah, you think about a lot of relationships, one person does the finances, it's just more convenient, right? And if you have a 20-year marriage, that means the person that hasn't looked at the finances for 20 years. So that's a good point. Sorry, Jonathan, did you want to jump in there?
No, I was just agreeing with Amrit's points. I think she made some really good points there.
All right, so let's see what our audience is thinking. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Please keep sending in your questions. They're fantastic. We're going to go through lots of questions today. We've added extra time for questions, so thank you for sending your questions in. Major role, 36%. Moderate role, 42%. Minimum role, 22%. So role lawyers play in mitigating the emotional toll of divorce and family. Yet, some lawyers just don't want to hold the hand and pull out the box of tissues, right? And they just want to solve the problem. But what's your take on this data, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the role the lawyer's playing, right? If you're negotiating an amicable cohabitation agreement, you're probably not going to have a huge impact on the couple's mental health, other than to be, helpful in getting that document done. But if someone's going through a messy divorce and they need that support, then lawyers can play a huge role. So it really depends on the circumstance. But I would say that a lawyer's approach can really dramatically influence the positive or negative
Amrit, any thoughts
response to tuition?
Yeah, any thoughts on the poll results?
Well, I would be curious to know a little bit more about the 22%, right? The where they don't play a role. So I'd love to hear more if there's people that want to put stuff in the chats about that, because I'm curious about that. I do think the emotion is so critical during this.
Probably the corporate and the tax lawyers answering that question that way, but let's throw it in the chat. Let's find out who you are.
Yeah, I'm curious. I throw it back there. there. Let's see what happens.
I could be wrong. All right, so let's go. Thank you, everybody, for sending your questions or answers in. A question did come in about CPD accreditation from the Law Society for this program. Application was submitted in December, but I think because of the holiday break, they haven't processed it yet, but we will send a follow-up email when we get an answer from the Law Society. So creating a supportive legal environment. This is, I'll take the lead on this, and then maybe Amrit and Jonathan can jump in. So and I'll just speak about what we do at my firm. Every firm's different, but we start at the intake process. So we publish lots of material online. We provide lots of guides, lots of links to resources. But when I say we start at the intake process, rather than hiring receptionists to answer our phones when a new client calls, we hire social workers. And they're trained to help clients deal with the first contact with the law firm. They're trained to listen to the story, to ask the right questions, to give them resources. A lot of initial contacts clients have with the law firm is very short and, not a lot of information is provided, and not a lot of lawyers meet with clients quickly. You may wait 2-3 weeks to get an appointment, or you may not even get a call back. So we start with the intake process. We hire social workers, and we start screening our clients at the front end. Certainly want to have the right pace and show the appropriate amount of empathy, especially when they're talking about difficult matters. We want to encourage their support network. So if they want to bring a friend or a family member to the consultation, we encourage that. What I do is I get them to write everything down ahead of their meeting with their lawyer, and go through that list, because oftentimes they'll forget what they wanted to, the questions they want to ask. They're just too overwhelmed and too anxious, or they could just be too distraught answering my questions when I'm asking about relationship details and what went wrong and the reason for the separation, and they may shut down and not have that, and forget what they want. You might want to develop safety plans. So if there's domestic violence going on, you may want to connect them with an appropriate person to develop a safety plan to ensure that their safety is secured. Connect them with family professionals, people that we have on today, Amrit and Jonathan. There's a whole community of family professionals across the province. You go to your local collaborative practice group, most or all of the collaborative practice groups have family professionals who are trained collaboratively, who can help outside of the collaborative system. So even if you do not have collaborative practice training, those professionals can still help your client help you create a supportive environment for your client. I think Jonathan mentioned, or maybe it was Amrit mentioned, you may want to consider setting up a shuttle system. So it could be shuttle CP or shuttle mediation, where if it's just too traumatic to be in the same room as their spouse, you do it separately and the professionals move from room to room. That often is quite effective in terms of supporting clients through this process. What I also like to do is debrief the clients regularly, whether we're in a CP setting, collaborative practice setting, or in a court hearing, online or in person. I want to spend some time with the client afterwards to go through what just happened, not just substantively, but process-wise and in terms of where their head's at. Oftentimes, I would come out of court pre-pandemic when we'd have our conferences in person, and I thought the case went fairly well, and we get 2 feet into the hallway outside the courtroom doors, and the client says, "What just happened in there?" No idea, right? This completely shut down. Can't remember what the judge told them. So you want to be mindful of that and be very supportive of that, and go at the client's pace. So those are some tips I would recommend. That's some processes we've implemented at my firm. But Amrit, what would you add to that in terms of creating a supportive legal environment?
Yeah, I think having the right professional at the right time in the right place, right? Just ensuring that if you're picking up on cues from your client and they're struggling, it doesn't mean that you have to become their counselor, that you're their therapist. In fact, it may mean that you're encouraging them to go get a therapist or work with a family professional or others that can help them, or go see their family doctor if they're struggling with a mental health concern, to begin the process and maybe work as a team to support that person who's in crisis, because they're coming to you when they're in crisis. Right? Yeah. It's one of the most difficult things that they've ever been through, and they're coming to you for guidance. And so it doesn't mean you have to wear all those hats. It just means that you might need to refer them to someone who can attend to those needs, because you are the person that's most knowledgeable to help them through their legal matter.
Yeah. And our intake team has a referral binder for different resources throughout and professionals. So on that call, they can actually relay the information in real time. But Jonathan, any suggestions?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to suggest that everybody who works in family law, whether you're a mental health professional or a lawyer or a financial professional, have a good list of people that you trust, that you can refer to. If you don't know the people in your area, go out and meet them. I get messages, every week or every other week from various professionals saying, "Hey, can we meet and chat and see what kind of services you offer and what kind of services I offer?" And, I am a mental health professional, but I can't provide mental health counseling for all my clients. if I'm doing, other work like mediation or an assessment or a collaborative practice. So I need good people to refer to. Amrit is one of my go-to people to refer to for sure. She's fantastic at what she does. But yeah, if you don't know people, then get to know people in your area and always have a list of, 10 top people that can help you. And that'll take some of the stress and load off you as a lawyer as well. So that your clients are well looked after by the people you trust.
Let's throw our next poll up there. And if you don't have that network, you can just do a search of resources that you can provide to your clients. The government and Law Society have lots of great resources. Could be 1-800 numbers,
Yep.
websites. We'll give you
Yep.
some resources today. But just take 20, 30 minutes, come up with a list of resources that you can refer to. If you're a sole practitioner, put it by your desk, by the phone. So when you're talking to your client or doing a Zoom call, you'll have the information ready. So great tips, Jonathan and Amrit. Thank you.
Russell, sorry, before you go on, I just want to mention one thing, because we were talking about resources. Many clients have access to an employee assistance program as well through their workplace, and at no charge for counseling. So that may be one of the first go-tos if they need immediate support and there's no time to find anyone else. If they have access to that, then that may be a great option as a starting point.
And as lawyers, you need to be mindful. This is not what we're trained to do. We're not experts. So don't play armchair counselor or psychologist. Rely on the people who are experts to do it. If you're not sure, refer your client to their family doctor, right? And the doctor's going to have resources and helpful information as well. But we don't want to overstep our capacity as well. That's not what we're trained to do. And that's may do more damage than good if we try to do that. Let's go back to our audience. Mental wellness, in your experience, how supportive do you think the legal environment is in addressing emotional needs of the clients during separation? 8% very supportive, 63% moderately, and not supportive, 30%. So doesn't look like we're doing a very good job according to this data, or there's room for improvement. Any thoughts, Amrit? Does this reflect what you're seeing?
Well, I think you can only do what you can do. And so we also have to look at the professionals who are providing the support and just how much strain and stress they're under. And maybe we're also talking about the mental health also of the professionals that are providing the assistance. So we've got to take care of you first, put that oxygen mask on you first before you can take care of someone else. So I think that would be my point. Yeah.
Jonathan, any take on our poll results?
I mean, there's more work to be done, 100%. I tend to know people like yourself, Russ, or, people like Brian Galbraith, or other lawyers who are more sensitive and aware of their clients' emotional needs and aware of mental health and don't carry around that stigma. But there's definitely a lot more work to get done out there. And I think Bell Let's Talk Month is coming up soon. So we want to raise awareness as much as possible.
Okay. So we're going to move into our next topic, Jonathan, but just give me a moment. We had a comment come in here. Kind of touched upon this earlier today. What role do lawyers' values and ethics play in terms of conflict resolution, collaborative practice, or facilitating mental wellness in the separation or divorce process? Is there an inherent conflict of interest in this regard, as it would seem that prolonging the client's conflict might be more lucrative for the lawyer? It can also be a common perception of the people generally. Well, I find, and I might be a minority, the quicker you resolve your client's case in accordance with their goals and wishes and instructions, the happier your client is going to be. They're going to refer more work to you, and you're going to be more successful. So you're going to make much more money doing good work efficiently than dragging out the court case or dragging out the collaborative process. That's my view, because you're going to create a raving fan. You're going to get more clients coming into your firm. So, we all know lawyers who grind the files and who are arsonists are going to burn everything to the ground. I don't think that's certainly not good for the client, but I don't think it's good for that lawyer, because nobody's going to want to work with them. They're going to know exactly what they're up to, and clients are smart. They're going to figure it out. So that's my take on that question. Any thoughts, Jonathan or Amrit, before we move into our next topic?
I agree with you,
I think
Russell.
I mean I agree with you, Russ. Like your attitude as a lawyer does make a big difference. And don't get me wrong, there are times when you need a really tough litigator on your side.
Yeah.
But in general, I think your perspective on how to meet your client's needs is really important. And if your perspective is, I got to fight like hell and increase conflict and win every motion and win in trial, it's not going to meet most clients' needs. Most clients need a more peaceful, quicker, cheaper resolution to their family law issue. So I think a lawyer's ethics and their attitude towards the work does make a big difference.
Yeah. You need to be an objective advocate too. If your client's giving you specific instructions, you need to follow your client's instructions. But I think the question was more geared towards the lawyer's conduct, not the client. Who, we all have difficult clients and or clients with unreasonable expectations. I don't think that's what that was geared towards. So providing emotional support to clients. Jonathan, can you help us out with this one?
Yeah. So the first thing I would suggest folks do is to learn to identify the signs of distress that suggest a client needs to go through or go get some more help and support. So there's an important concept in psychology called decompensation. And this occurs when someone gets so stressed out that they lose control of their emotions. So those symptoms might be excessive, uncontrollable crying, suicidal thoughts, self-harming behaviors, yelling, I don't know, angry outbursts. They can't sleep, they can't eat, they're missing work. Maybe they're becoming violent, or maybe they're a victim of violence. These are all signs that the person needs more help than they're getting, because sometimes we just have too much stress to handle all by ourselves. And divorce and separation is a great example. So if you see any of these signs, immediately refer them to a mental health professional. But actually, when I'm working with clients, even if they don't have these symptoms, I almost always recommend, hey, do you have a therapist? Have you considered getting one? And Amrit mentioned EAP programs, employee assistance programs. They're one of the reasons they're great is because they're fast. You could usually get an appointment within a week or two. Whereas if you go to like a community clinic, you might be waiting 6 months, right? So so I would say learn the signs. If you want to learn more, there's a training program called Assist, ASIST, and Shannon can post a link to the training in the chat. And it's just a kind of a mental health first aid for people who aren't mental health professionals. Highly recommend it. Great course. I took it myself a few years ago, and I would recommend it for everybody who works with anybody who's ever, emotionally dysregulated. So then, obviously referring clients is really important, both for our clients, but also we might feel like we need some extra help to help cope with the stress. That might be working in a collaborative team and getting support from your team, but it might also be going and speaking to a therapist yourself. And a couple of things that you mentioned, Russ, that were really important, and you too, Amrit. You always have to know what I call your area of permission. And that's what role that your client has hired you to do. If you're a lawyer, your client hasn't hired you to give mental health treatment, so refer that out. As a mental health professional, they haven't hired me to fix their finances. Refer to a financial professional. So be quick to refer them to people that can help them, and don't hesitate if you feel you need help as well as a professional.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Amrit, you want to add to that?
No, I think Jonathan said it perfectly. That
He's
makes
so
sense.
good, eh? Just
I
knocks it out
know,
of the park
right?
every time. He leaves nothing for us to talk
You
about.
two, stop, go on, carry on. Yeah.
Jonathan's like, stop. I don't want to hear anymore. All right.
Stop, tell me more.
There you go.
This is our final poll question of the day. Everybody's been fantastic in participating today. So I want to thank our audience for all the fantastic questions and all the great responses to the poll. So what self-care strategies do you think lawyers can adopt to recognize and prevent burnout while handling emotionally challenging cases like divorce? And we've given some examples of some of the trauma we've experienced. But this will be interesting to find out what our audience thinks. Give everybody just a moment. Then we're going to talk about lawyer self-care strategies. Then I think we're going to be moving into some Q&A. We usually wrap up at 1 o'clock, but Shannon's extended it to 1:15. Our audience is pressed to give a little bit more time for Q&A. So thanks, Shannon, for that. And I want to thank Shannon. She did put some information to the chat about the ASSIST program. So you can get that there as well, and we'll include it in the show notes. So thank you again. Let's see for our final poll results of the day. All right. Regular counseling or therapy, 37%. Mindfulness and stress reduction techniques, 67%. Setting boundaries on workload and client interactions, 77%. Yes, boundaries. Other, please put it in the box. We've got 12%, so we want to hear what you think the other strategies are. All right, so lawyer self-care strategies, recognizing burnout and warning signs. We talked earlier at the beginning about colleagues we know who've committed suicide, drug addiction, other addictions that colleagues experience. They run afoul of the rules of professional conduct, in trouble with the law society. Sometimes they get disbarred as well. Amrit, what do we need to know?
So burnout basically is when you're worn out physically and emotionally. And how do you recognize that? You recognize that by perhaps you're having difficulty sleeping, your appetite has changed, either eating too much or too little, or you're unable to eat like anything. Or you may be going more towards the comfort food, eating more junk food, eating high fat food, high salt, high sugar. You may be having more alcohol consumption or other substances. Where it may be really important is to incorporate some self-care strategies, and some of them are mentioned in that poll, which are awesome. But just ensuring that there's adequate hydration, that there's good nutrition. Talking about it when you're feeling full. I always give the pressure cooker analogy, right? If we stuff it, eventually that lid's going to come flying off, and it may fly off at the wrong person, at the wrong time, the wrong place. Open the valve a little bit. Start communicating, talking about it with your peers. Find somebody that you can connect with that's willing to listen when you've had a difficult situation, or if you're in a collaborative team, you have your others to lean on. The people that are closest to you are going to notice when you're experiencing burnout, because there's going to be changes potentially in your behavior, your mood, your emotions. You may start experiencing like some intrusive thoughts. You may be having greater anxiety or depression. And it's really important to have those connection with others so we can mitigate some of these things, and setting those boundaries and knowing when the end of your day comes, so that you don't finish at 5, but then you're working on your dining room table until 9 p.m. You're actually ending at 5 and then coming back into the office the next day, and not working over the weekends if possible.
Or it's just family time, right? Dinner's
exactly
over, you're watching TV,
right.
You've got the laptop. You're not even paying attention to the program. You're just continuing on with your day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that work-life balance, right? And understanding how to kind of keep those things separate will help with the longevity, so you're able to function well. I also find having certain hobbies that can, where you're noticing a sense of completion, can be really helpful. Sometimes these legal files may take a long time to process to get to completion, and it may drag on. Whereas if you're like doing a 1,000-piece puzzle, you start it, you're in the middle of it, and you finally end it. And then you get to enjoy this beautiful view. Or it may be preparing a meal that's really quite intricate, and putting it together, you actually see a sense of completion and you get to enjoy it. And so having something that really matters to you. And I share that one because when I was working in critical care for 13 years, I would often find that I needed to have a conclusion. I needed to have something that would be ending, and it would be in a positive way. And so that it wouldn't just linger. right? And so I find that having something that can have a conclusion is helpful, whatever that may be. Maybe that's a hike on a trail, maybe that's like an exercise routine or whatever it may be, but just basic self-care strategies. They can look like anything. It depends on each individual and how you want to do it, but mindfulness, meditation, journaling, talking about it, seeking your own therapy if you need it. There is a lot of courage in seeking help. It's not a sign of weakness, right? And mental health is health. I'm going to steal that from the Canadian Mental Health Association. It's not mine, it's theirs, but it is really important that we acknowledge it because it's really affecting professionals and all people. It's affecting all people.
Make your bed every morning first thing. Then you've completed one
That's
thing,
it.
right? There's the whole
100%.
thing.
I do that. Absolutely, Russell.
The Marines,
I go
the
by that
Marines talk
principle.
about that. Make your bed, no matter what your day's like. You've completed
That's
one
it.
thing. Jonathan,
Yes.
tips?
No, I don't make my bed. No, I don't believe in that. Yeah, no, it's tough work, and we have to be humble about the effect that it has on us and leave our pride and our ego at the door and just recognize that sometimes we have more stress than we can handle. And when we do that, we need to balance it out with the kinds of things that Amrit was talking about. For me, that's time in nature. I love being outdoors, and the great thing about the outdoors is a lot of the places you go in the outdoors don't have cell service. What does that mean? You're not
Yes.
getting emails from clients. You're not getting messages from clients. You're not getting, panicked emails from lawyers saying, where my clients are in crisis, deal with it. So for me, time in nature is the way to recover. And I would encourage everyone to do that. I'm not alone in loving nature, but it does have a lot of healing properties.
Yeah. This career is like a black hole, right? It'll take as much of you as you want to put into it, being a lawyer.
Yeah.
I remember pre-pandemic, this is, sounds like the old days, well, 4 or 5 years ago, whatever that was, right? 4 years ago. I'd come home from work, take my suit off, put my pants on, like my jeans on. That was like the formal transition. My day was over.
Yeah.
During the COVID, right? The day never ended. Like you're at your computer doing Zoom calls back to back to back. I love the tips you guys are giving. I just want to touch upon our audience contribution here. Somebody says they do yoga. They find it helps their practice, helps them with her stressful practice. Actually, our host does yoga, Shannon. She inspired me to do it. I did yoga before today's thing. It's fantastic. Having a team available to help you provide assistance on files. Some great tips coming in from our audience. I love the walking in nature. My morning routine is to walk my dogs in the forest every morning before I start my day. I still do it. It's just a good way to set your clock. Gratitude is really important. You start your day with gratitude. It certainly helps relieve stress. I've got this thing called a Whoop. I don't know if anybody knows about it, but what it gives you like a display, and you can monitor how well you're sleeping, what your recovery is, what your strain is, what your stress levels are, what your resting heart rate is. So you can see how well you're sleeping, how your body's recovering. They give you the Whoop for free, but you subscribe to it for like 20-30 bucks a month, and then you can cancel it whenever you want. Anyway, it's a good way to measure it. So if I see my recovery's low, I'll start thinking, okay, what is it in my lifestyle or my practice that's causing me not to get a good night's sleep, or is causing me to stress it over something? So this is scientific data from this device that's telling me, yeah, you're hitting a wall here, and then you got to start thinking, okay, was my alcohol intake? Was my diet changed? What's going on? So those are some of the tips. Hobbies are important. Having mentors, vacations are super important. We had an associate lawyer working for us who had not taken a vacation in 2 years. And just a machine, grinds through the work, great colleague, super professional. But we basically had to tell him to go home and not come back to the office for 4 days because we're worried he was going to burn out. It was just, having that vacation and chance to reset, and having a hobby or something that you can do, whether it's yoga or walking in nature or exercise or playing a sport, join a book club, whatever your non-legal, interests are, it's good to do that as well, because you get a lot of balance and it helps you with the stress, and it also helps you with morning signs as well. And rely on your colleagues. And if you're stressed, talk about your colleagues. We talk about cases all the time that are stressing us out. And I think that is therapeutic in itself. Just understanding, what I'm experiencing is normal. This is a crazy file. How do we approach it in a professional manner? So those are some of my tips, but I want to be mindful that we want to save time for Q&A, because that's why we added time. And look who's back. Shannon, with all the wonderful add-ons into the chat box and links. Thank you so much for being such a great helper, Shannon, throughout the program.
It's my pleasure. And I just want to thank Amrit and Jonathan once again for sharing all of your insights. It was very informative. And as you mentioned, I know there's still a lot of work to be done in this space, but really appreciate your contributions to the progress, because it is so important. So on that note,
another tip came in: clean your horse's stalls. I love that one. So that's her sense of completion. That's fantastic. Thank you for
I love it.
as we're
Excellent.
going. Go ahead, Shannon. I thought that one was great.
Yeah.
There was also, Russ, if you can just say the name of your wrist device that you were talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
So he was asking about that.
Called a Whoop. So WHOOP. So just search Whoop. It's incredible. They just send
Is
it
this
to you.
sponsored, Russ?
I'm not getting paid to do this. No. But
Maybe we could work on a sponsorship for you.
our general manager, Laura, I told her about it, in terms of what I measure. When she's got a super stressful job, I don't know how she does what she does, but she always does it with a smile on her face. She got one and she absolutely loves it. She can, she'll know if she's having a bad night's sleep, and you get an understanding as to what's happening that's causing you the stress and your stress levels. And anyway, don't get me talking about it any more than I did, because I'll go on. That's a whole nother live event series, just talking about the Whoop. But there's other
we'll have a
devices.
Whoop live event.
The Apple Watch is really good too for all those things too. I just
yeah.
happen to use this one. Any kind of smart device, this is one that I use.
Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing. I also just want to address some questions regarding the CPD hours for this program. So just to reiterate, we have applied for EDI professionalism hours for this presentation. Because of the holidays, I believe there's a bit of delay. So as soon as we have an answer from the LSO, we'll let all of our audience members know if it has been accredited and for how much. So stay tuned for that. But we are going to spend the last few minutes just going over some other audience member questions that came in. So first off, are there any specific resources or programs available to lawyers to support their own mental wellness as they navigate emotionally challenging cases? I know Bob already mentioned a few, but are there any others you want to share before we close off today?
Yeah, I should have mentioned these earlier. Thank you, Shannon. So there's the Law Society has a vast amount of resources available to you. And I think Law Pro, our insurer, has resources available as well. But the member assistance program at the Law Society, so lso.ca, has a whole bank of resources. There's a site that you can go to called homeweb.ca that has member assistance programs for lawyers, paralegals, law students, judges in Ontario, and their family members. That's www.homeweb.ca. There's a wellbeing resource center at the Law Society of Ontario, which has a number of law society and community-based support systems that you can access. Again, just go to Law Society, search Law Pro, tons of resources for us. If you're not sure, in addition to those resources, you can talk to the practice advisory, who can provide you with assistance as well. I know there was a comment earlier in the day that if you do report to the Law Society that you're struggling, they're going to launch an investigation for you. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but you can certainly access the website and get all these resources that are also being provided by third parties as well. Great question though, Shannon. I should have mentioned that earlier. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. And yes, we'll make sure to include those in a follow-up email tomorrow, where we'll be providing additional resources that were mentioned throughout the presentation, as well as in any questions that have come up as well. So another question that we have here is, what role can technology play in providing accessible mental health resources for both clients and lawyers involved in divorce proceedings?
Jonathan's jumping up
Great
and down.
Yes, I know you, Russ, are super into technology and how it can help enhance our lives as family law professionals. I'm very into technology that helps with mental health. So there's all kinds of options for online mental health support these days. Some of them are free, some of them cost money. I'll ask Shannon to post a few options, things like Inkblot, BetterHealth.com are new kind of platforms that are online for you to reach out for help, and you can do, video therapy or phone therapy, or even in person through these apps. But they're becoming much more common and much more accessible. There's also in Ontario, the provincial government pays two organizations, one called Mind Beacon and the other one called Ability CBT, to give free online cognitive behavioral therapy for anyone who's suffering from something like depression or anxiety. That can really help. So there's a lot of you already mentioned, Russ, the wrist devices like Apple Watches and others that can help monitor your well-being and pay attention to them. If your watch is saying you didn't sleep well and you're really stressed out, then you need to spend part of the rest of your day relaxing and doing something fun. So yeah, technology, I think, is going to play a huge role, and some really big companies like TELUS are getting into the game. So you know that it's I think it's going to be a huge growth industry in the next few years.
Again, this could be another hour, but if you think about technology, right, you can do your court hearing remotely from the safety of your own home with support network there. You don't have to face your spouse or the abuser if you're a victim of domestic violence in person in a physical courtroom. So lots of huge advantages to technology. That's just one example. I can think of many others. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, thank you so much for those resources, Jonathan. I'll make sure to include those as well. So we have time for one last question here. How can clients and lawyers work together to create a more collaborative and less adversarial divorce process that reduces emotional distress?
How can who?
We already did. It's called collaborative, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, collaborative for sure. But if you're in court, bring in professionals to help you, develop a team to help you and your client. It could be Jonathan or Amrit or any social worker. We often do it if there's children's lawyers reports. We'll help bring in a professional to help coach the client through that. Financial professionals we talked about extensively today. The only one thing I just want to add to all this, Shannon, since we did go longer than usual, as part of the audience feedback, tell us if you like this new format, if it fits with you, if you're thinking it's better adding on the additional time. I think we can go on longer, but we want to be mindful of everybody's time.
Absolutely.
And just one, if I can make one more comment, just to say that if any of the lawyers out there want more assistance in setting up their practice to promote their and their clients' mental health, give Amrit or I a call, or another mental health professional, and we'll come in and give you some advice on how to set up your practice in a way that promotes everyone's mental health.
And just on that note, I didn't think of this. If anybody wants to learn more about collaborative practice, we can give you information. If you're not collaboratively trained, we have a training program that you can sign up for. I'm not selling it. It's not for a few months, but I didn't even think of that. If you want to learn more about collaborative practice, we can give you lots of resources and send you in the right direction.
Yeah, we'll make sure to include that as well. Some of our collaborative resources in a follow-up email tomorrow. So that looks like all the time we have for today. So I just want to thank Amrit and Jonathan once again for joining Russell, and thank all of our audience members for joining to listen into this important discussion, and also for all of your participation and questions. It's very much appreciated. And as Russ mentioned, we very much value our audience feedback. It allows us to make changes changes to our programs, some improvements to our programs, such as, for example, our extension today. So we'd love to hear from you. So if you have the time, if you can share your thoughts, that would be fantastic. So that, as I mentioned, that's all the time we have for today, but really appreciate everyone joining us, and hope you all have a wonderful day.